Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by tall trees and green fields, there lived a kind and hard-working woodcutter named Jack. Jack was a simple man, and he had lived in the village his entire life. Every morning he woke up early, ate a small breakfast of bread and milk, and took his old rusty axe to the nearby forest to chop wood. His job was not easy. He spent many hours cutting trees, working hard to provide for himself. Jack did not have much. He lived in a small, humble house with a roof made of straw and wooden walls. His clothes were old, and his shoes had holes. But despite his poor circumstances, Jack was happy. He was content with his life, and he found joy in the little things. The fresh air in the morning, the chirping of the birds, and the quiet of the forest. Jack loved nature, and he felt a deep connection to the trees he chopped. For him, cutting wood wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. Jack wasn't alone in the village. There were many other villagers, but he didn't have many close friends. He was a quiet man, and he kept to himself most of the time. The villagers liked Jack because he was always kind and polite. He never argued with anyone, and he always helped others when they needed it. Jack was known for being honest, too. Everyone in the village trusted him because he was always truthful. There was a small shop in the village where people could buy food, clothes, and other things they needed. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Clare, was a kind woman who liked to chat with Jack when he passed by. Sometimes she would offer him a cup of tea, and they would talk about the weather or the news of the village. One day, while Jack was walking through the village on his way to the forest, Mrs. Clare stopped him. "Jack," she called out, "how are you today?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Clare," Jack replied with a smile, "just on my way to the forest to chop some wood." "That's good to hear," Mrs. Clare said. "I was wondering if you could do me a favor. I need some wood for my stove, but I can't carry it myself. Could you bring some by my shop later?" "Of course, Mrs. Clare," Jack said. "I'll bring you some wood this afternoon." "Thank you, Jack," she said, smiling. "You're always so kind and helpful." Jack nodded and continued on his way to the forest. As he walked, he thought about Mrs. Clare and how grateful he was for her friendship. She was always so warm and caring, and she never asked for anything in return. Jack knew that he didn't have much to offer, but he was always willing to help when he could. When Jack reached the forest, he began his work. The trees were tall and thick, and it took a lot of strength to cut them down. Jack had an old axe that he used every day. The axe had been with him for many years, and though it was rusty and the handle was worn, it was still sharp enough to cut the wood. Jack loved his axe because it had served him well over the years. It was simple, but it was reliable. As Jack worked, he hummed a tune to himself, enjoying the peacefulness of the forest. The sound of the axe hitting the wood echoed through the trees, and the smell of fresh pine filled the air. Jack was lost in his work when something unexpected happened.